Buenos días. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a todos y a todas. Welcome, everyone. This is the 20th episode of our weekly Facebook Live Spanish sessions. Excuse me. Yo soy David. I'm David y estoy aquí con mi colega, quien está en Berlín, David. David, ¿cómo estás? ¿Cómo va?
Hola a todos. Hola David. ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo están todos? Yo estoy muy bien. Doing very well here in Berlin. Estoy muy bien en Berlín. Aquí se está muy bien. Siempre bien. Hace un tiempo especial. Hace mucho calor. It's very hot today. I think this is the last hot day here in Berlin. So I'm very happy about that. Yo soy de Colombia, soy de Bogotá, y Bogotá es una ciudad fría. Bogotá is a cold city, it's a cold place, because it's high in the mountains. So every time when we are changing the season, I'm very, very excited. I know that many people are always happy about summer, but in my case, it's like leaving summer. That's the best time in the year. But this is a lot about me. David, how are you? I veo un fondo nuevo. I see a new background.
Sí, quizás ustedes se han dado cuenta de que yo estoy en un nuevo lugar. Maybe, perhaps you all have noticed that I'm in a new place. And that is correct. You'd be right. So I am in Brooklyn. Yo estoy en Brooklyn, en la ciudad de Nueva York, in the city of New York, donde vivo, pero donde no he estado por muchos meses, porque la cuarentena, yo fui desde aquí, I went from here a la ciudad de Nashville, donde yo me crecí. Is that the right word, David? Where I grew up?
¿Dónde crecí?
Sí. Pero hoy estoy aquí en Brooklyn. Yo he regresado a mi apartamento. I've returned to my apartment y voy a estar aquí por no sé cuánto tiempo. I don't know how long, but pocos meses quizás antes de regresar a Nashville para las ferias for the holidays. So I'm so excited to be back. We'll keep doing these weekly broadcasts, so no interruptions there. But I'm just excited to be in a new place and have a change of scenery for once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, David. I'm very happy that you are back home. And I think we are ready for today's session. I see, veo a muchos espectadores desde diferentes partes de Estados Unidos, de México también. He visto a alguien. Puerto Escondido, Kathy. Muy bien, San Diego. Wow. Nos ven desde todos esos lugares. They are watching us from those places. I'm very happy. This is the magic of internet. So back to the topic, David. Last week we talked about the differences when addressing people in the Spanish-speaking world. Which are tú, usted, and vos, the third one. All of them mean you in English. So English is a bit more, it's a bit easier. But today we are going to learn something different. So we are going to put this aside and we are learning today more about a very useful word that has lots of functions in Spanish, and you might also have been a bit confused about the word se, S-E, in Spanish, because we surely saw it in many places, in many sentences. We've been also talking about direct, indirect object pronouns. We've been talking about reflexive pronouns, and we'll also see some other examples where we can also use this word in Spanish. So maybe we should start with the uses that we are more familiar with. David, what do you think?
That sounds great to me. Start with what we know.
Yeah. So I think, David, we can start with the word se. When we use it to replace le and les in front of la, lo, las, los. So this is the indirect object pronoun se. And as we saw some weeks ago, we use this se in this case to avoid saying lela, les, los, les, la, and lo. And I think it's easier to understand this if we show an example to you here on the screen. It's very simple. So here we see las flores, the flowers. Yo se las di a Álex. I gave them to Álex. So in this case, it's always important to recognize the object, the direct object in Spanish, and also what the indirect object is. In this case, we are giving something away, the flowers, and who is getting them? In this case, Álex. So Álex is isn't doing anything at all. Here, he's just getting some flowers from me. So in this case, we have a Álex. And in Spanish, it's very, I would say, it's very normal to have here a duplicated pronoun when it comes to indirect objects. So in this case, se, between yo and las, refers exactly to a Álex. And in this case, we are not using le, as it would be the rule, because we are having a direct object being replaced by a pronoun, las, which refers to las flores. So I gave them, yo las di a Álex. I hope this is okay. Maybe we can have a look at another example sentence.
So before we move on, if this is confusing, we have a whole episode about this. A couple weeks ago, we talked about, I think more than once, maybe more than one episode, but indirect object pronouns in Spanish, and this weird rule that exists where the words le and les before another object pronoun that begins with el, so lo, los, la, and las becomes se. So I would recommend maybe going back a few episodes if you want a real refresher on this and to see some more example sentences of this in action.
Yeah, that's a good tip, David. Thank you. Let's have a look at another sentence here. Yo se lo conté todo. I told him, her, them, everything. And in this case, we are using se instead of le to refer to three different persons. In this case, we can mean him, her, or them. So in Spanish, we need context to know what person we are referring to. So in this case, it can be everything, him, her, them. And everything means in Spanish, todo. And lo and todo are duplicated. They are the same. So as you can see, in Spanish, we don't change the word that much, as it happens to verbs, for example. So todo remains always todo. But sometimes we need also some other words like pronouns, direct object pronouns, indirect object pronouns, to make it clear that there is such a word inside the sentence. So don't get confused by that, because sometimes there are many repetitions, like there are many words that are coming twice. So don't get confused by that. Lo and todo are the same. And this is because todo is being a direct object, which means, okay, let's duplicate that word by using the corresponding direct object pronoun. And that's why we need to use se, because lo is following it. Yeah. So this was the first use of se that we learned about some weeks ago. David, what is the second function of se in a sentence?
So se is also an indirect or direct object pronoun, which is the same use casage, the same use case, I'm sorry, as the examples we were just referring to, but this is for only reflexive pronouns in the third person. And that's a lot of grammatical technical jargon to basically say, we use say when someone, a subject, or something does an action or a verb to oneself. So if we see this first example, we'll see a pretty clear way to get to know this example in context. So we have a sentence like, Daniel se lava las manos. So that translates to Daniel washes his hands, but you could also read it literally as Daniel washes himself the hands. So if we break it down, we'll see that we have the subject, Daniel, we have the verb lavar, which means to wash. And when you have the verb lavarse, that means to wash oneself. So you know that you can wash something that's not yourself. You can wash the dishes or you can wash the car. But in this case, we're talking about Daniel's washing a part of his own body. So he's washing his hands and therefore himself. So the construction we would use is Daniel se lava, which means washes himself. Las manos, then you specify which part of himself he's washing. So that's not really the same as it is in English, because usually in English we would just say, I wash my hands, I wash my face. And it's clear that we're talking about doing an action to ourselves. But in this case, in Spanish, we actually do specify, and we use this word se, which is a reflexive pronoun. And we also have an episode about reflexive pronouns if you're confused too. So I would recommend watching that if you want some more examples of how this is used. But this is a little bit different from the use case we just talked about, because in that one, we're referring to indirect object pronouns that are someone else. So if I give flowers to Álex, the se refers to Álex, the indirect object, but here the se refers to Daniel himself in the third person. So I hope that makes it a little more clear. David, what else would you add about this?
Yeah, I think that's great that you are saying this, because if we change that se with le, which would be the indirect object pronoun for the third person, here we would be saying Daniel washes someone else's hands. For example, I don't know, Daniel is washing his little kid's hands, and in Spanish you would say Daniel le lava las manos. So here we can see, like, perceive what the difference is between the indirect direct object and the reflexive pronoun. In this case, the action is being reflected on the same subject. Daniel se lava las manos. In both use cases, in the last one and in this one, we see that se is used for the third person. And that's very important. Third person means him, her, them. And when we are also addressing people in a polite way, usted, ustedes. So for all those persons in Spanish, we'll use se a lot. Yeah. So just keep that in mind. Maybe we can have a look at another example sentence, David.
Ellos se acuestan muy tarde. So that would translate to they go to bed very early, but for the case of explaining in the most literal way possible, we could say they put themselves to bed very early. So we have this verb acostar, and it's a little bit different from its reflexive form acostarse, because acostar means to put something down, to put it to rest. But you could use that verb with maybe your small child if you want to put your child to bed. But in this case, we're talking about a group of people, ellos, they, who are putting themselves to bed. So we use this third person reflexive pronoun se to refer to themselves. And we're saying ellos se acuestan, they put themselves to bed. And muy tarde is an adverb phrase, which means very late, and that helps modify or describe the verb. But what we want to focus on is the verb acostarse, which means to put oneself to bed.
Mm-hmm.
David, do you have anything else that you would add there?
No, it's perfect. As you can see, there are many reflexive verbs in Spanish that are not reflexive in English. So don't be scared, because it's something that we learn also with practice. So go out and talk to your Spanish friends, and let's use these words.
Mhm.
I know it's also difficult to remember, okay, should I use lo, la, se? Um, what use case am I using here? I'm referring here to when speaking Spanish. This is just theory. This is the first step to understand something, the differences. And we know that you don't process information in a way that, okay, now I need to use subjuntivo form of something, or I need to use, say, in this case. Um, it all comes with practice. So the first thing that we need to do here is let's understand the rules. And maybe we can have a look at a third example that we brought here to you. Carlos se enamoró de mí. This is a reflexive verb, a pure reflexive verb, because there is no way to change the se to another word, like to another object. Carlos se enamoró. He fell in love with me. Enamorarse de alguien. That's the infinitive form. So as you remember, we also learn some verbs with prepositions, and enamorarse, to fall in love, needs the preposition de in Spanish. Enamorarse de alguien. So I think we covered the direct, indirect object pronouns, and now we cover the reflexive pronouns. We have more use cases for you today. They are very easy to understand if we have a look at the translations. The translations will help us also understand what we mean. So let's go on with the next use case, which is se, meaning each other. And I think it's easier to understand this use case if we look at some examples that we prepared for you, which are ellos se hablan a menudo. So as we can see here, if we translate say with something in English, it would be each other. They talk to each other very often. It's just enough to use se here in front of hablan to mean to express the same to each other. Ellos se hablan a menudo. Don't worry if you don't have time to note down the sentences, to write down the sentences, because we have a document where we add these sentences so that you can also have some time to go through them and to understand what we are just planning. So you just need to sit down and chill and pay attention, and maybe also even ask questions. That would be great. Sorry if you're already asking questions. We will get back to them when we finish this topic. Say as each other. And we have here another example where we see se meaning each other. So let me add this. Mis padres se conocen desde hace 30 años. My parents have known each other since 30 years ago, or for 30 years. And here we are also reviewing a topic that we learned 2 weeks ago, the difference between desde, hace, and desde hace. So here we are talking about something that happened in the past, and it's still continuing. So, mis padres se conocen desde hace 30 años. There we see they know, they have known each other since 30 years ago. So, David, do you have anything here? Anything else to add?
Yeah, a few things. So for this example sentence, if you remember this not the first, but the second episode we did, we talked about the difference between saber and conocer. And saber is more for facts and information. They both mean to know, but conocer was about familiarity with people and places more so than cold, hard data or information. So that's where you see this verb appearing again. So we use it in the context of two people knowing each other. That's a perfect way to use it, and that's how we're using it in the sentence here. And then also, I wanted to ask you, David, if it's unclear, sometimes if you're talking about say as each other in this context, could you also maybe throw in the phrase uno a otro or something to help specify like one to the other? So in the sentence, ellos se hablan a menudo here, could you say ellos se hablan uno a otro a menudo, just to specify it's one person talking to the other person, instead of maybe translating it as they talk to themselves, because that's a different meaning. And I think that could be a little confusing if you don't know what the context is exactly.
Yeah, there is a literal translation in Spanish that we also very often, el uno al otro. This can also be attached in the sentence. Ellos se hablan el uno al otro a menudo. But it's important to maybe notice that we are still using se. So it's again duplicated, as it also happens with other things in Spanish.
Right.
So ellos se hablan el uno al otro a menudo. Cool. It's okay. If we take then the second example sentence, mis padres se conocen el uno al otro desde hace 30 años. I think no one will complain about that because it makes completely sense in Spanish. In terms of saying that, actually, I think it is like exaggerating a little bit. It's
maybe extra, not even necessary.
Yeah, but it's possible to say that.
Yeah, I feel like this example, it's more clear that we're talking about they know each other, rather than interpreting it as they know themselves. So you don't even need to say el uno otro or something like that. But in the earlier sentence, maybe someone could read this as they talk to themselves often, when we really want them to read they talk to each other often. So maybe it would be more helpful if you wanted to specify, no, they're talking to each other, not to themselves. Then you say, ellos se hablan el uno a otro. But I'm harping on a point that is not extremely important. So we can and should move on. Just one thing I wanted to mention.
I think there are certain cases, certain verbs that need also more specification. So this is also one case, because they can just be like in two separate rooms and they can just, I don't know, talk in front of the mirror. So that would be like the other, like the reflexive use of the verb without talking to each other. So in certain cases, it's important to make it clear that it's each other, which is in Spanish el uno al otro. But context will tell you as well what's meant in Spanish. And actually, there is a question here related to this sentence, because this is very important. This is third person again. So here we are talking about people, about them talking to each other. Again, third person means he, she, or they, even usted and ustedes, which is the formal way to address people in Spanish. And with all these personal pronouns, we will use se. Because Jenny's asking here, how would you say we talk to each other? So this is also a way to say each other in Spanish. But Marilyn is right. It would be nos hablamos. So in this case, we are also using each other in English, but we need to make it clear in Spanish that the reflexive pronoun, in this case, changes from se to nos, because here we are talking about us, talking to each other. Nos hablamos. So thank you, Marilyn, and that's a great question by Jenny. So I think it's great. So we can move on.
Great.
If there are no other questions, because I mean, so far we've seen 3 use cases that refer to either indirect, direct object pronouns, or the se instead of les, or the reflexive pronoun se. or now each other. But now we are going to see something which might be new to many of you, which is se for passive voice.
I love passive voice.
We love passive voice.
Or rather, passive voice is loved by me.
And passive voice is loved by you.
Understood.
I think it's my impression. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. In English, we use passive voice more often than in Spanish, or maybe passive voice is not used the same way as in Spanish, because there are different ways of using the passive voice in Spanish. Just for you, as an information, passive voice is just an element, like a resource that we use in languages to actually start the sentence with the direct object being the subject. So in this case, that's why David was saying passive voice is
Loved.
love for me. Yeah. So in this case, I love passive voice, but we can invert the order of the elements in the sentence. So that's why passive voice is very important. But I think it's easier to understand this passive voice if we look at an example. Alan has an important question. No se habla el idioma, and we'll get to that very, very soon. Let's start with this. Se venden casas en el sur. Houses are sold in the south. In this case, se is being used with the only purpose of express passive voice, because venden, the form vender, which means to sell in Spanish, is conjugated in the third person plural, as if casas would be selling something. So casas are not selling themselves. So there is a weird sentence construction in Spanish with se that allows us to use these casas as a subject of the sentence, starting with se, and the verb is conjugated according to casas in this case. So las casas, se venden casas en el sur. Casas is here the subject again, and that's why we see that the verb is conjugated accordingly, casas venden. And then we would be saying houses are selling themselves in the south, but we are sure that casas cannot work in the real estate. They are the actually what is being sold. So in English, and this is something that I love about English, because English is more logical in this case. Houses are sold in the south. It's pretty straightforward, easy to understand, easy to use. In Spanish, you will come across these sentences and this use case very often, because we don't say the literal translation in Spanish would be las casas son, or casas son vendidas en el sur. Don't worry about that. We will also come back to this topic in one of our later episodes. How to use passive voice in Spanish. There are certain tricks that we would like to show to you. But in this case, we are using se as a word that helps us use the passive voice in Spanish. Maybe we can also use another example sentence, which is this one. If you like smoking, you might not want to see this. Se prohíbe fumar. Smoking is prohibited. It is prohibited to smoke. So in this case, we are seeing an action, fumar, which is the sentence, the subject, and that's what we see in the English sentence. Fumar, smoking. Es prohibido. This is something that we can also say in Spanish. Fumar es prohibido, but it's more common to say se prohíbe fumar, or even prohibido fumar. But se prohíbe fumar, it's something, it's an action. Smoking is prohibited. And again, here we see that the fumar is the subject and it's in singular. So verbs are always in singular if we use them as a subject. as a verbal phrase having the function of a subject. So in this case, eat is prohibited. So you can see there that fumar can be replaced with it. It is prohibited. So smoking is prohibited. And here we are not using prohíben. We can also say se prohíben las fiestas aquí. That's a very boring town. Parties are prohibited. Se prohíben las fiestas. Yeah, this is something that can also be said in Spanish.
Right.
Alan is asking, can you say casas vendidas? Yes, we can say this meaning sold houses, casas vendidas, with the ending as, casas vendidas. Yeah, this is something, sold houses. This is something that we will talk about in later episodes. Promise. Passive voice.
So I think Alan also had a cool other example that I noticed as an example. He said, no se habla el idioma, and that fits in line with the same passive voice we've been talking about. So you might see signs if you're traveling to a Spanish-speaking country that say se habla inglés or se habla español. So that would translate to English is spoken or Spanish is spoken, which implies, I mean, Spanish is spoken here. So that's another use of the passive voice. Alan's sentence here would translate to the language isn't spoken because el idioma is the language. But that's another really, really great example of how to use passive voice. And it's kind of in the same vein as se prohibe fumar, se habla español, Spanish is spoken. So great example from Alan.
Mm-hmm. I think, David, this is, and Alan and everyone, this is a very good example of passive voice, but this is also sometimes confused with the next use case that we brought to you, which is se as an impersonal pronoun.
Mm-hmm.
So pay attention to this. It's pretty straightforward. There is only one thing that happens here, which is sometimes we cannot recognize whether it's passive voice or it's impersonal pronoun. So let us show an example sentence to you. Se come mucho en casa de mi abuela. So here we can translate se with one. One eats a lot in my grandmother's home. And this is an impersonal pronoun because I'm saying someone, people, I don't know, even myself, someone eats a lot in my grandmother's home. So in this case, we are using a subject like se, and look at the verb comer. So it is conjugated with the third person singular, as if were he or she, in this case. So se come mucho en casa de mi abuela. And this is something that we use sometimes in Spanish just to add a subject in a sentence, but without saying who.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, se come mucho en casa de mi abuela. And that's the reason why this is called impersonal pronoun, se as an impersonal pronoun. So when we come back to the sentence, se habla español, o no se habla el idioma. In this case, we can also understand this sentence as the language is spoken, or one speaks the language, or one doesn't speak the language, as in this case. So, se habla español aquí, for example, can also be translated as we speak Spanish, someone speaks Spanish, one speaks Spanish. So this is also very cool in Spanish because we can also use this with lots of functions. So it can be both passive voice, or it can be an impersonal pronoun. One speaks Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Same with this example here. We're calling it an impersonal pronoun because we're translating it as one eats a lot in my grandmother's home. But you could also potentially translate this as much is eaten or a lot is eaten in my grandmother's home. And it has pretty much the same meaning. We're not specifying who is doing the eating, but we're just saying in general, whoever goes to my grandmother's house will be eating a lot, whether it's he, she, myself. So we're saying one eats a lot, or a lot gets eaten in my grandmother's home. So they're very related, but it just depends on kind of how exactly you want to convey meaning or have your sentence be interpreted.
Yeah, that's correct. So in that case, it's a bit confusing because we are using a verb like comer. So something is eaten or one eats something. But let's have a look at this verb. En este hotel se duerme bien. In this hotel, one sleeps well. So in this case, the verb to sleep, dormir, in Spanish, is something that we call intransitive, which means we don't need any other word to make it clear. So duermo bien means I sleep well. So I don't need any object. I don't need any recipient in the sentence. I can just say yo duermo. So in this case, we understand that this is clearly impersonal pronoun. Someone, one sleeps well. That's enough. So se duerme bien. In general, all guests say the same. So in this hotel, one sleeps well. So I think this. We hope that this is not confusing to you. And again, if you come across a sentence with say, let's practice a little bit. Okay, what's the reason for that say to be used in that sentence? And this way we can also understand, okay, this is the reason. Maybe I can also come up with some sentences on my own that I can also use with say. And they sound also very high Spanish, because this is how Spanish speakers speak, actually.
So Megan asked a great question, and she says, could you also say se duerme bien en este hotel? Yes. Feel free to move around that little prepositional phrase en este hotel, either before or after the verb phrase, which in this case is se duerme bien. So the kind of the nucleus, the core of the sentence is around the verb. So you say se duerme, and then the adverb bien, well, sticks with the verb because it modifies it. But outside of that, then you could move the prepositional phrase either before or after. So en este hotel se duerme bien, or se duerme bien en este hotel.
Yeah, it's the same question that we see here, Marin. Yes, correct. Both are correct. And Kate is asking, can we say en ese hotel nos dormimos bien? Well, there is something funny here because there is the verb dormir, which means to sleep. And when we make a reflexive verb out of it, as we saw also in the first use cases today, so we would have here dormirse. Dormir and dormirse have slightly different meanings. And again, this is something that we also explained many weeks ago. You are also always invited to check our all videos where we talk about many other things. Among also them, we have the difference of verbs with the reflexive pronoun and without the reflexive pronoun. So in this case, dormirse means to fall asleep. So this sentence, if we change the word say and we change the subject as well, so we would have nos dormimos, and that would mean we fall asleep. Well, okay, in Spanish we won't say dormirse bien. So if we change the subject, then it would be enough to say en ese hotel dormimos bien without nos. We are adding se duerme bien because se is like a subject, like it's a person, it's someone, it's something that is sleeping. So this is something that we use here in this example sentence to just make it impersonal. So it is like I don't want to because I don't know who, but it's just someone. So in this case, we say se duerme bien. But if it's we sleep well in that hotel, it would just be enough to say dormimos bien en ese hotel. Yeah. So I hope this is clear. So yeah. So I think we can maybe take some minutes to talk about the last use case that we brought today to you, because this is the less common one, and we use it with specific verbs. And one of them is ir, to go. So in Spanish, we have the sentence to go, ir. And in this case, as you can see, ellos se quieren ir ya. The verb ir means to go. So we would, without se, this sentence would mean they want to go now. And if we add the se, uh, it would be something like to leave in English. They want to leave already. Ellos se quieren ir ya. But this is something special, because in Spanish, that verb, which is reflexive, I mean, it can be also interpreted as a reflexive verb. Yo me voy. It is a weird verb, because if you say yo me lavo, I'm saying yo lavo, I wash something, I wash myself. So it is clear it's an action that is coming back to me. So with the verb ir, this is not the case, because I go him, I go her, I go them. No, this is impossible to say it in that way in Spanish. But in Spanish we have these different verbs, ir and irse. Irse is not a reflexive verb in that sense that the action comes back to the subject. It is just an action that is being it's being intensified. This is like the term that we use in linguistics. So ir means to go. Irse means like, oh, you have to leave. Yeah. So that's how we translate this verb in English. Ellos se quieren ir ya. And there is also another verb, which is morir, to die, which kind of has the same use case here. So let's have a look at this sentence. Nuestro abuelo se murió hace 20 años. Our grandfather died 20 years ago. If you ever ask a Spanish native speaker what the difference is between nuestro abuelo se murió hace 20 años and nuestro abuelo murió hace 20 años, they would say no difference. It sounds very similar to me. So what we are saying here is, okay, morir. By adding this se, we are intensifying this verb. We are saying this is something that maybe hurt me. I remember my grandpa, um, and I don't want to forget him. He's very special to me. So this se murió feels more personal. It's like this action of, oh, he passed away. So both verbs, and also a verb like comer, comerse. This is something that we also saw some weeks ago. Those verbs have a very similar meaning, but when we use se in that case as a reflexive pronoun, it's a fake reflexive pronoun, because we are not doing an action that is coming back to the subject. It is just that we are making it like the impact of the verb is more significant in that case. So when we are translating these sentences into English, it's very difficult to recognize the difference. So ir, irse, ir to go, irse to leave. This is something that we can learn in that way. Me tengo que ir, I gotta leave, I gotta go. Me tengo que ir o tengo que irme. Both are correct. Mi abuelo se murió hace 20 años. Or ella se está muriendo, she's dying. O ella está muriendo. Yeah. I think both cases are correct. Is that like die versus pass away? Yes, Boris, good question. Morir, morirse. This is one of these typical examples where Spanish native speakers know that they use this verb with se in many situations, but we don't see the difference between saying morir and morirse. Yeah. So, David, do you have anything here to add?
Maybe to make it more clear, the intensity aspect, we should talk about the verb comerse versus comer really quickly. Just because that sticks out to me as one of the clearest examples of how you take a verb with one meaning and then kind of exaggerate that meaning. But just briefly, I can talk about that because we're running out of time. But what I wanted to say was, you could say a sentence like, yo como la manzana. I eat the apple. Oh yeah, okay, we have a sentence right here. Miguel se come una manzana. So if you were just to say Miguel come una manzana, then you know the verb comer means to eat, and that would translate as Miguel eats an apple. But if we have this word se in front of comer, we say Miguel se come una manzana. We know that se won't really be a reflexive pronoun here, because that would translate as he eats himself an apple, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So how we translate it is something more like Miguel eats up an apple. Like if you eat the whole, if you're eating it with a lot of agency and you're very active and you're very invested in the eating process, like to eat something up to an English speaker sounds different than just to eat something. So that's how I would translate it. That's how I would kind of convey this sense of intensity. Does that sound kind of about right, David?
It's perfect. It's just the case where we see that this is not a reflexive verb, in like meaning reflexive. It is just that it has the reflexive function, and this is the way we use these verbs actually to maybe strengthen the effect of the action. Él come una manzana, él se come una manzana. So yeah, he eats up the apple. So, and two questions by Alan. What about fallecer? Is that reflexive? So fallecer means to pass away. It's yeah. So we can also say this instead of morir, to die. Fallecer and to die are fallecer and morir are synonyms. And fallecer is not reflexive. So mi abuelo falleció hace 20 años. That would be exactly the same as mi abuelo se murió hace 20 años. Falleció. So it's not reflexive. And in this case, comió, yeah, comió is the past tense for the third person. Miguel se comió una manzana. He ate up an apple. Yeah, so cool. Se come is like eating con mucho gusto. Susan, se come is like eating con mucho gusto. It would, I think David said like Miguel ate the whole apple, and this the whole. That's the meaning of se in Spanish, in front of comer. So comerse means like to eat up something. That would be the meaning. So because we can also say se comió la sopa, aun cuando no le gusta. He or she ate up the soup, even though she didn't like soup. So
I can also imagine, David, this might be wrong, but if someone prepares a big meal for you, and or like, let's say there's a big group of people and someone puts a feast in front of them, they might say comanse, like eat up, something like that, which is the imperative form of comerse, to eat up. So just, it's kind of nuanced. I don't think anyone's gonna really misinterpret what you mean if you say comer versus comerse, but it's kind of more of just of like an idiomatic expression.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I think Dana is trying also to find out what the easiest rule would be. It is sort of like the difference between I'm going to get lunch and I'm going to get myself some lunch. I guess so. Yeah, I think it makes sense to me. In Spanish, ir means to go, and irse means like to leave, to abandon this place. I gotta go, me tengo que ir. So it is
like to get out, maybe, like we got to get out of here. It just it conveys so much more agency to me. It's like, oh, we are going to, instead of going, we are leaving. We are like taking ourselves from here and we are getting out and going to there. So just a little more urgency, perhaps.
And last note here, Marilyn, no, you don't need se with fallecer. Don't use it ever. Fallecerse is not correct. So it is enough to say fallecer. Yeah.
Great.
Cool. Awesome. So David, I think we have here 3 questions for you as usual. You can also keep posting your questions, your thoughts, and we'll try to solve them. But as usual, we have an example sentence, but in this case, we will be asking about the use case. So let me explain to you what this is about. So we have the sentence without translations, so it's going to be a bit difficult. Ellos se ven todos los días. Ellos se ven todos los días. And our question would be here, what use case is correct in the sentence? A, each other. So does se in this sentence mean each other? Or is it an impersonal pronoun, B? Or is this an indirect direct object pronoun? What do you think?
So just for a little bit of help, the verb ver, ver, is the one that you see here, conjugated, and that means to see. So if you had never seen that verb before, that means see, but it's conjugated specifically for a specific particular subject. So we will talk you through how to kind of take apart this sentence.
Yeah.
But it looks like everyone is getting the right answer for the most part.
Awesome. Yes, David, what's the right answer?
So the right answer is A, as everyone seems to have gotten. Great job. So we would interpret this sentence as they see each other every day. Ellos, they, se ven. So we know that ver means to see. If you conjugate it as ven, that means they see. And then we have this word se right before the conjugated verb ver. So it's kind of like saying they see themselves every day, but the way we would want to interpret that is they see each other every day. So that is the correct answer. And I'm glad that everyone got that. That was really impressive.
That's amazing. Cool. So maybe let's move on to the next sentence. David, this is a bit more difficult, I would say. Las cartas se las doy. Okay, there is something here missing. Maybe we can add here mi exnovia. I'm going to do that very quickly. So a mi exnovia. So while I'm fixing this, you can start thinking about the right answer. So what does se mean here? Is that each other? Is that an impersonal pronoun? Or is se used here instead of les?
So think about the verb that we see here, which is dar, to give, and it's conjugated in the first person yo form. So yo doy means I give. So think about when you have a verb like to give, what you need to have with that verb, specifically objects, and what kinds of objects, and what objects they would be specifically. We know we have some choices. We have lo, la, los, and las for direct object pronouns, and then a couple different options for indirect object pronouns too. So as I speak, I guess I'm kind of giving away the answer, but everyone seems to be getting it as well. This is also very impressive.
Yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, so again, this one is a bit more difficult because las cartas, this is something that is being given, and las cartas and the fourth word las are the same. They refer to the direct object. So since we are duplicating the direct object and the indirect object, as you can see, because a mi exnovia, she's the recipient, and here we are using se instead of le. That's why we are sure here that the right answer, as Phyllis says, is C, replaces, because it replaces le. Awesome. That's great.
Yeah. If this was confusing, it always confuses me too, but the way I think about it is, dar requires both a direct object, what is being given, and indirect object, to whom that thing is being given. And then, so las as the direct object refers to las cartas, the letters, and then to whom, a mi exnovia, would be le, if not for the fact that it came before las, and we know that when that happens, le becomes se. So good job to everyone who got that right. And if you need more help on this, feel free to ask more questions or go back and watch our earlier episode on this Facebook page or our YouTube channel as well.
Cool. That's great. And as usual, we have homework for you. So next week, we'll be talking about this sentence in the beginning. Aquí se habla mucho español, in this session, in this meeting. And I'm very happy about that. So aquí se habla mucho español. So next week we will talk about this. We will also show the right answer to you. A, is it this passive voice? Or B, are we talking here about se as an impersonal pronoun? Or C, is this an indirect direct object pronoun? So yeah, don't forget this sentence. We'll review it next Tuesday, same time for you. I don't know what time it is in the US, in Mexico, or there where you're watching us from. In Germany, it's very late, 8 p.m. So, but I'm always very happy to be here with you and with David. And I think there are no more questions, as I can see. Maybe we are overseeing something. No?
I think it's about time to say goodbye.
Be very expressive if used correctly.
That's very true.
Yeah.
But if there are no more burning questions, we can also come through and answer some on the back end after this video. But it's about time to say goodbye. This has turned into one of our longest episodes yet, which is wonderful. There's a lot to go over. But we always say, David, we'll keep it short, and then our amazing viewers just have some wonderful questions. So with that, we will start signing off, but I just wanted to say thanks again to everyone who joined us. If you're new for the first time, welcome. If you've been with us for all 20 episodes, we're so happy to see you every week. If you want to catch up on past episodes, you can find them here on the Facebook page or on our YouTube channel, which I will drop the link to in the comments. You can also connect with us on social media here on Facebook or at BabbleUSA on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok even, and we have an amazing Quora space with almost, I think we're approaching 100,000 followers, so lots of language learners there to interact with, ask your questions, and then Babbel Magazine is a great resource as well for finding language learning content about Spanish or any other language that we offer at Babbel. So join us next week, Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time, just like this week. We will have another topic prepared for you, and we're always open and welcome to your suggestions on those as well. So, and then Jerry asked David, where's the doc with the sentences? So we should be sure to drop that too, in case you want to review what we've talked about and the examples we've shown on the screen, this episode and the ones before.
I'm adding the links in the comments. So I'm doing this right now. And I also take the time, some seconds, to say goodbye. Thank you for your attention. This is the longest episode that we've ever had. So sorry for that. But we're always very happy to be here. So I hope you understand our passion for languages. And this is the Google Doc. So we will be adding also the sentences that we show today to you. And yeah, have a lovely day on the other side of the world.
Adios.
Adios.